Well, they've sucked Australia dry, or they're sucking it dry right now as we speak. This is a big story. Talking oil and gas. Imagine if you had your house broken into by a thief, smashed the place up, stole your stuff, and then left you with the clean-up bills. The police came around and they said to you, oh no, there's nothing to see here because, of course, PwC and Clayton Utz have signed off on it. It's okay. Thief gets off scot-free. You have to pay for the rehabilitation. Well, that's what we've got now with the oil and gas. Big story today by Pete Milne, who runs a website in WA on oil and gas called Boiling Cold. We published it in MWM as well. It's a terrific yarn because, and you won't read anything about it in the press, don't you worry about that, because for years the oil and gas majors have been drilling Australia's seabeds and sucking the continent dry of our reserves, our oil and gas reserves. But now, guess who has to pay for a lot of the bill? Yes, we do. Of course, the problem is that they haven't paid much tax, these people, and very little in the way of royalties along the way. It is a robbery, and we have copped the clean-up bill. Big story. Going to be the same deal with mining voids in coal as well. Mining voids are the big pits that they leave. They're meant to rehabilitate them. In some cases, there are bonds where the company does have a legal obligation to rehabilitate. But this is a big headache. If you look at BHP's Mount Arthur coal mine, the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere or close to, they're talking about turning it into lakes now to rehabilitate, pumped hydro and this sort of stuff. They should be picking up the bill, as should all miners who have destroyed the environment and ripped their profits offshore. Anyway, governments, of course, the federal government, the WA government, WA Inc., is caving in to Chevron, one of the big four global US oil majors who've been mining on Barrow Island for years. Barrow Island off the coast of WA, and now we've got to all pitch in, pin the ears back, and help with the cleanup. We are paying for it. Your tax dollars are paying for it. So here it is. What have we got? We've got the four majors who've been robbing us for years on the tax and royalties front. Exxon, Shell, Chevron, the Japanese too, British Gas fracking up in Queensland and so on, without paying any tax until the last couple of years when we've hit them so hard, they're starting to pay a bit now. But for years, we're talking Exxon, $80 billion worth of revenue, not one red cent in tax, and not much in royalties. Just for those who don't know, royalties v tax. Royalties, taxes are just income tax like everybody has to pay. That's corporate income tax. They don't pay any of that. And royalties are not taxes. That is the amount which the company has to pay the government, us, for exploiting our resources. They, of course, don't. They call it a tax. They don't see that they've got to pay. They think they should be getting our oil and gas and our coal for free, for nix. Of course, that isn't the way the world works, but that's the way that they frame it. So let's just get to the guts of this. You can read the details online, but in the coming years, about half of the royalties paid by Chevron over the many years, Barrow Island's been going since, I think, 1985. The 2.3 billion, Pete Milne writes, the 2.3 billion plus decommissioning on a WA nature reserve will be part funded by the federal and WA governments, returning about half of the royalties that they received over 6 decades. In the coming years, writes Pete, about half of these royalties will flow back to Chevron and its partners to offset their clean-up costs, diminishing the total value Australia got from the extraction of these resources. Yes, waiting for the Fin Review, the Australian Fossil Fuel Review, and the Australian Rupert Murdoch's The Israelian to report on this. No doubt they'll be doing little briefs, what we call briefs in the journo game, about that size, buried on the inside of page 7 or something. In any case, in the Chevron case, now the tax avoidance lobby will tell you, they'll tell you, hand on heart, that, it's all legal, we just minimise our tax legally. That is not the situation at all. The situation is the ATO can't afford to go after all the big tax avoiders. It's too costly. When they did go after Chevron, the villain in this piece, a few years ago, they took them to the court and Chevron warned them. They waved the finger at the government and said, if you take us on, it's going to cost you $30 million. So the ATO just doesn't have the budget to pay $30 million for all these prosecutions. So it has to pick and choose. So it picked Chevron because Chevron's ploy was so outrageous. What they did, they were lending themselves money from an American subsidiary at 1% to Chevron Australia. They were borrowing at 1% in the US and lending it to Chevron Australia at 9%. Now that 9%, we're talking $1 billion and more, or 2.5, I think it was, $2.5 billion. At 1.2% they borrowed. They on-lent the money to Chevron Australia at 9%. Ring-a-ring-a-rosy it was. There was a few other little entities involved in it around the world, probably Singapore. Massive markup, which, as we wrote many years ago, which delivered a $1.1 billion profit. That's a profit from us, the taxpayer, the public, because they rorted us with this 9% when interest rates were 1%. That's the way it works. Just a scam, a very big scam. So when any multinational tax avoiding apologists say, oh, it's all legal, it's only legal until you've been dragged into court, you've defended the case all the way, and a judgment is made against you. That's when it becomes illegal. So our law-breaking Chevron has been established as a lawbreaker, but they all do it. The ATO's just got to pick its mark. They all tax avoid billions and billions every year, which could be going to roads, education, schools, hospitals, the army, all of our public needs. These guys are just cheats, basically. You can see it all. We've done the top 40 tax dodgers for many years, and we've identified all of them. And these guys that we've named are all in on this caper. The other point is, what they've done now, of course, in terms of cheating, is they've just gone around, they move on to the next thing with their highly paid tax lawyers and accountants from the big four, PwC, EY, KPMG, and Deloitte. And they just come up with the next caper, whether it's thin cap or some other transfer pricing caper. In the Chevron case, it was transfer pricing of money to get this $1 billion profit, gouge it out of us, not paying tax. So there we go. We urge you to read this story because this is going to be the big thing from now. Because we've got a lot of coal mines closing. We've got a lot of oil and gas projects closing also, and they need to be cleaned up. And the cleanup costs are in the billions. And here we have a prime example of the government just saying, don't worry, you petals. We'll look after your clean-up costs for you after you've made this big mess and not paid us any corporate income tax for decades, or very little, and little in the way of royalties as well. I mean, imagine having a bakery in your town and the baker expected to buy his flour for free, the things which make his product. That is royalties. It's our oil and gas. They should be paying for it. They made dozens of billions in profits from Australia over the years. Thanks for your support here at Michael West Media. We've just gone on a bit of a jihad for some money because we need to get a couple of full-time journalists on from part-time because we need to expand this operation now. So if you can help us, that will be fantastic. But please like, share. If you can't help us, we've had a couple of comments on this. Don't worry about it. If you haven't got any money, our adage is pay not so that you can read it, pay so that everybody can read it. That's why we haven't got a paywall, because we want everybody to read it, because it enhances the influence of independent media. We break the old narratives, like the fossil fuel narratives, etc. So if you haven't got money, don't worry about it. If you have, tip us a few bucks, and we'll make sure that it's very wisely spent on good young journalists and a few old codgers too, like me, doing our best in the public interest.